Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Engineering Tomorrow Drug Delivery Systems Lab. We're going to talk about a little bit about how engineers are involved in the pharmaceutical industry. And they're actually involved in a lot of different ways, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But what we're going to primarily discuss is how to design a system for delivering medicines in a very engineering way so that they are taken up by the body in an appropriate way for the patient's health. So let's get started. As you may know, Engineering Tomorrow breakouts and labs have all been developed by engineers. And I worked on this lab together with Maria Krug, who is a recent chemical engineering graduate from the University of Notre Dame, and is currently working at AbbVie doing biologics. But just to give you a little bit of background of me, I am also a chemical engineer. And I spent 17 years with GE, General Electric. And one of the jobs I had at GE was actually in the pharmaceutical business, in GE's pharma business, which made injectables, which were used whenever you're going to have a scan. So if you've ever had an MRI or a CT or an NMR type of scan, quite often a patient will get an injected material, and that allows the imaging system to take better pictures, basically to see more of what's going on inside your body. So we used to make those. And again, you might notice here, both of us were chemical engineers, and chemical engineering is actually an area of engineering that is very well suited to the healthcare industry, at least the pharmaceutical industry, not only in developing drug systems like we're going to talk about, but even more importantly, in manufacturing the pharmaceuticals, manufacturing the drugs, because they typically are chemical manufacturing and packaging in their areas that chemical engineers do a lot of work in. So let's talk about what the lab is about, and we'll start with the conceptual basics here. So pharmaceutical drugs are administered, or they're meant to be administered in a way that has the biggest impact on helping a patient get better. So here are four ways that drugs can be administered. One is very common, very typical, you've probably seen before, and that's just oral administration. So that's basically just taking a pill. So maybe a Tylenol or an Advil or any kind of pill that you have to take. And that basically what obviously goes into your digestive tract, goes into your stomach, and then gets absorbed into your body. Another way that it is done is through inhalation. So you may have seen inhalers. That's quite often used for asthma. And essentially then you're injecting the drug or the medicine directly into your lungs, and then it can get taken up much more quickly through your blood vessels in your lungs. Another way is quite often if you're in a hospital and you're on some medication, they'll have an intravenous line in one of your veins. And in that way, they can inject drugs or medicines directly into your bloodstream very, very quickly. And then the fourth way that we show you here it's called subcutaneous injection, but it's basically an injection, a shot. So we've recently gone through COVID, and the COVID vaccines are essentially injected this way, where you put a needle into your skin, through your skin, and you inject the medicine directly into your below your skin tissue. So there's obviously pros and cons of each way. Some of these are easier than others. Some of them can be more dangerous because there's a risk of infections, but they're all very valid ways of applying or administering medicines to help people. So let's talk about how a drug delivery system works. Drug delivery systems are basically the thinking about what's the best way to get the drug to the right place at the right time. And it's really important, obviously, because you want to have a drug that is effective in your recovery or in your treatment of your symptoms. And it's important for it to be safe and to act the way you want it to act. So let's talk about some drug delivery systems. Now, this is actually a video that talks about a very specific drug delivery system. It's research that's being done at a university in Israel. And I know it's kind of a cartoon but it's a good description of how engineering and medicine can come together to figure out effective engineered methods for treating diseases and for delivering drugs where they need to be delivered.
One of the major problems in injecting medication such as chemotherapy is that the medication affects the entire body and not only the sick cells, and side effects can be very severe. Innovative research is currently developing a cunning drug delivery system. Ben-Gurion University scientists led by Professor Yossi Kost are developing a system to sneak medication like chemo or genes past the body's defense mechanisms and straight to their destination, even a cell organelle like the nucleus inside a cancer cell. The scientists are working to create nanoparticles made of the special polymer and a medication that can distinguish between healthy cells and cancerous cells. The nanoparticles are small enough to pass through tiny holes existing only in blood vessels surrounding cancerous growths. When the nanoparticles identify a sick cell by its external receptors, for example, they attach to the cell. But not all of the particles are able to penetrate the cell membrane. Here the researchers use ultrasound in an extraordinary way. They focus low-frequency ultrasound waves on the target spot to make a tiny and temporary opening that enables the particles to penetrate. Next, the particles need to get to the nucleus in order to release the medication. The smart polymer knows how to identify unique intracellular proteins that travel into the nucleus, and it hitches a ride on them. Once the particles reach their target, they need help releasing the medication from the polymer. The scientists again turn to ultrasound for help. The ultrasound waves are aimed at the target cells and the medication is released, while the rest of the body's cells are safe from side effects. The research combines the use of ultrasound, nanoparticles that identify sick cells, and smart guidance to the target point, all in an effort to provide effective healing without harmful side effects.
So what you've seen in that video is it can be pretty complex. Obviously, you want to get the drug delivered to the right place at the right time, and you saw that there are many different ways of affecting that delivery. They were using ultrasound to actually do some very interesting things, not just for imaging, but for actually causing drugs to be released at certain points in time. And it's also important to understand the biology of cells in order for this to work. Now, understanding how medicines or really any component can diffuse through other materials is really a critical thing. And diffusion is quite a key fundamental process that you learn a lot about in chemical engineering, because it's also something that's fundamental to a lot of other chemical engineering processes or chemical processes, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But essentially, for the drug transport, first of all, if we take you step by step, first of all, when you swallow a pill, and as I said, it makes your way to the stomach. It then breaks down, and the drug substance is then absorbed in the stomach, and it's absorbed by blood cells via diffusion through the membranes of the cells. So here's a representation of your blood, which includes a lot of different things. There's plasma, white blood cells, red blood cells. And if you zoom in on the red blood cells, you can see what we have here, what looks like the blood cell membrane, which is basically what's enveloping your cell. And you want the chemicals, the medicines, to actually go through that cell membrane. So this represents over time how originally there's a lot of concentration of material on the outside of your cell membrane early on. But then over time, it slowly diffuses through the membrane until there's an equilibrium. And this is one of the fundamentals of diffusion, is that diffusion is actually the movement of materials or the movement of chemicals, and they move from a high concentration area to a low concentration area. That is what diffusion is. Diffusion, now we get into some real engineering here. The diffusion, as I said, is driven by concentration, so from high to low concentration. And the way engineers talk about diffusion and measure it and model it is through something called Fick's law. And essentially what Fick's law is shown over here on the left. The diffusion flux, or J, is going to be a function of the concentration gradient of the material. So the concentration is this phi, and the change in concentration with distance, or the gradient over distance, is the driving force. And then there's going to be a diffusion coefficient, which is the big D here. So essentially what diffusion is, if you kind of do a thought experiment here, let's say you have a jar of water. If you insert or you inject some dye molecules into it, originally it's going to be very concentrated in the middle of the water. And then over time, those the dye molecules are going to basically diffuse until eventually the whole beaker here has one constant color, because it's been diffused evenly. And now there's no concentration gradient driving the movement throughout the water beaker. So it's basically going to be now at steady state or equilibrium. So again, with diffusion, it's the concentration gradient that's critical. So I mentioned that this is actually very important in chemical engineering, because this is also the fundamentals of how many water treatment processes work, with driving the concentration from a high concentration to a low concentration. But in water treatment, it's actually, we're trying to do the opposite. We're applying extra pressure to reverse that direction of diffusion. Diffusion is also key in the scrubbing of gas, which is basically the purification of gas, which you can see in the center picture here. And then, as we talked about in biological processes, diffusion is quite important, where you can have the diffusion of oxygen in your lungs, which is how your body gets its oxygen. So diffusion is very fundamental process, and chemical engineers work on this and utilize the fundamentals of diffusion in designing reactors and all kinds of processes where we're dealing with materials. So let's talk about a little bit closer to what you're going to be doing in your exercise today. The way drugs are designed is obviously they have to be packageable, that they have to have a package so that they can be handled. Now we're talking about not injectable, but rather pills that you would take. And they're typically coated with something called enteric coatings, which are essentially coatings that allow them to be handled, but that will encapsulate the key pharmaceutical element, or the element that we're trying to have in your body that'll help with any disease or any symptoms you have. So these enteric coatings have to be designed very carefully. And quite often they're actually made out of polymers. And part of the reason polymers are good is because they can dissolve. You can make them in ways that, depending on the polymer, that are safe for the body, and they are basically good packaging type of materials. So you can see an example of what we call an immediate release pill, or immediate release bead, where you may have the core, you'll have a drug layer, and then you'll have an overcoating. So when this goes into your stomach, the overcoating will dissolve, and then the drug will be released in one process. Now, another way of maybe delaying the release or the application of the drug is to have a delayed release bead, where you may have multiple layers of materials. So in this case, you have an overcoating. You may have a slow release delay polymer or material. So that gives time for the pill to get to your stomach or maybe into your further into your body. And then by delaying the dissolution of that, then you can actually release the drug a little bit later in the digestive process. And that's partly what you're going to be designing. You may imagine that you can have a multi-release process now, and that's what a dual delayed release drug delivery system is. Essentially, it's a process where you want to have a certain amount of the drug released early on, and then you want to have the pill still be dissolving slowly, so that several hours later you'll have another dose of the same drug, so that you can take one pill, for the day instead of having to take the pill multiple times. So this shows a little bit about what that looks like. If you have an immediate release, where you just have a single release in your pill, you may have a peak concentration of materials in your body, and then it decays, and then down here you'll have to take another pill. But with a delayed release, you get a single peak for your first release, and then the pill is still working, and then once you break through to the next level, you get a second release, and that's the dual delayed release, which is basically an engineered drug delivery system. Now here's an example of what that looks like. This is actually a pill or a medicine that's used for acid reflux. And essentially it is a dual delay release packaging, so that it allows the pill, the first layer of the pill to release higher up in your digestive system, and then the second part of the pill to be released further down your digestive system in your large or small intestines. So let's get to what you're going to be working on. You're going to be building a dual drug release system. And as you know, with engineering, kind of the fundamentals of how engineers work is that you have a design, you have a model for how things should work, you make your initial design, and then you test it. And if it doesn't work, you learn from what didn't work so that you can get a better design and a better trial the next time around. So hopefully you'll have enough materials so that you can do multiple tries on this. What we've given you here are some kind of basic materials here. So first of all, I want to show you the pills, the little drug pills that you're going to be having. Here's an example of them. Your colors may be different. I have a blue and I have a yellow one. And these are essentially just little bath tablets that kids put in their baths to make the color of the water change. So they're non-toxic, but I will say, obviously, do not eat them. They're not meant to be eaten, but they're not gonna hurt you. So the idea is that you're going to build a drug delivery system so that one of these gets released first, and then after a delay, the second one gets released. Now, what we also have given you is some kind of interesting polymer material here. This is actually a polyvinyl alcohol sheet. It's a very interesting material. You can see it's very firm. It's translucent, and you can see the chemical structure here. So it's a polymer because it's a long chain. But what's really interesting about it is that if you put this in water, it will eventually dissolve. So this is going to be your coating that you're going to use. And you're going to have to make a decision about using this coating. You may also be able to use other coatings. You could use paper towels. You could use plastic bags, but that's not going to dissolve in water. You can use anything else you want to delay dissolution or basically the breakdown of your pill system. But what's interesting is that you could also do multiple layers of this PVA sheet if you want, and figure out how many layers do I need in order to have the delay that I want. The idea of the lab is that you're gonna use 2 pills at a time, and you're going to design a coating or a packaging of these pills so that the one pill releases in about 5 seconds, and then the next pill releases in about 30 seconds. And just to give you an idea what this could look like, we have a little video of an example of how this could be packaged, how you might want to design it, how you can basically assemble it, and then how you should test it based on what how you measure your design and evaluate your design using your eyes and looking at and timing when these things release. So you've seen an example in the video of how what your task is, and you should think about how could I test how fast some of these materials and these coatings will actually dissolve in water. So what we want you to do, as I said, is to design a system where you have a dual delivery system, where you have a one pill dissolving first, giving the color of water some certain color, and then 30 seconds later or more, have the second pill be released. And then you start to see that color. And then ultimately, over time, both of those colors will be all kind of combined. So we want you to take some good notes, do your experiments with documenting how many layers, what kind of materials you used, and then also your results. And then obviously test your pills and see how it all works. All right. So in this case, if you had a yellow and a red pill, in the end, you should ultimately have an orange solution. And then take some photographs, take some pictures at various times in your process. So here's just some pictures that demonstrates kind of what you might see. In this case, after 15 seconds, after close to a minute, and then finally after 5 minutes, what your trial looks like. This is really just a couple of more formats that you can use for analyzing your results and documenting your results. And again, the goal is to try to figure out, can you get a drug delivery system that releases first at 5 seconds and then finally at 30 seconds. Finally, we've given you some costing. So we want you to think about what is it that you can do to optimize your not only your performance of your pill system, but also the cost. But in the pharmaceutical industry, it's usually quite typical that the cost of the material, the cost of the packaging, the cost of the pharmaceutical drug is very, very small compared to the value and the price that gets paid. And the reason for that is because the pharmaceutical companies invest a lot of money at risk in designing and developing new drugs, and it's a very expensive process. So that is one of the reasons that pharmaceutical drugs are very expensive because you're not just paying for the drug itself or the packaging, you're also paying for all that development cost, which is what allows us to develop solutions to the medical problems using pharmaceuticals. I hope you enjoy the lab. It's gives you a little idea of how you have to think about packaging, how engineers are involved in that, the design of packaging and the testing of packaging. And if you did like this type of breakout, if you're interested in the pharmaceutical industry or how engineers are involved in the healthcare industry in general, you might want to look more into the topics of drug discovery, customized or personalized medicine, medical devices. As I had mentioned before, at GE, my previous career or one of my earlier jobs in GE, we were making pharmaceuticals, but GE also is a major producer of medical devices for imaging. But so are other companies, Philips and others, Siemens. And then also maybe you'd be interested in genomics. And if you're interested in the areas that types of engineering that are involved in the pharmaceutical or healthcare industry, there actually are a lot of different areas. Obviously, biomedical engineering. I mentioned chemical engineering for manufacturing of pharmaceuticals, and of course manufacturing engineering. A lot of these medical imaging equipment is material science, and mechanical engineers are involved in that. So there's a lot of opportunities for engineering in the healthcare field. So I wish you luck with your lab breakout, and I hope you're successful in designing a dual release drug delivery system and have some fun doing it. So good luck.